Right, let's have a go at going through chapter 9, Oblomov's Dream. Wow, what a chapter. It's taken me a couple of days to get through this one, so don't worry if you're feeling like you're getting a bit behind, because I am as well. It's a long chapter, almost 50 pages, and it was actually the first bit of the novel that was written, or published, or written, both actually. So, yeah, we left chapter 8, which in itself was a banger of a chapter. It gave us loads and loads of background and insight into Oblomov's condition. And then we get the dream. So it was published, let me just tell you, 1849 in Sovremennik. That's the journal it was published in, and I've got a note here which is from a critical companion by Galia Dement, which says, Oblomov's Dream is Goncharov at his very best, mixing personal and impersonal, comedy and pathos, idyll and unvarnished realism, nostalgia and social critique, and doing all that without any visible compulsion to resolve what may be irresolvable. So it's a big deal, this chapter. And how to review it? So it takes us back to Oblomov's childhood, and it jumps through different ages and different seasons, and we get insight into what makes Oblomov tick and what's made him out to be the way he is. So let's see how many pages of notes I've got here. 6, 8, 9 pages of notes. Will I read out all these quotations? I very well might, because they're important, and that's why I'm taking notes, because the process of handwriting these notes with some lovely pens is actually helping me a great deal to understand the novel and to slow down with it, which is why it's taken me 2 days to get through this chapter. Plus, of course, I had other life stuff going on, you know how that is. I'm sure you have that as well. So, first of all, Dement talks in a critical companion about how in this chapter at the beginning we get a glimpse into an unreliable narrator. I think what she means by that is that the narrator might be playing with us a little bit, having some fun, and I certainly got that impression, particularly a bit later on, which we'll get to. But the example that she gave was at the beginning, where we're getting descriptions of different types of scenery. So to compare Oblomov, first of all, she talks about, rather, the narrator talks about, what need is there, this is a quotation, after all, what need is there for the imposing, the menacing, the sea, for example? You can keep it. Nor do mountains and precipices exist to bring comfort or joy to man. So he's talking about rugged scenery and about the power of nature and about its power to inspire awe, and how that's not for him. You can keep all that. Then we get the contrast of Oblomovka, where the sun shines bright and warm for half the year, and when it finally moves away, it does so without haste and reluctantly, and looking regretfully over its shoulder once or twice as if it hated to leave the place, gives it an extra day or two of warm sunlight as a parting gift to relieve the dreariness of autumn. So we're moving into an idyll, and it's almost cloying in the way that it's described in some parts. So that's a word that came up for me, and then I was delighted to find it a bit later on in the translation. So, yeah, it's idyllic living in this village, this area, this region, but there's no contrast, there's no adventure, we'll get to that. This spot that time had passed by invites the careworn and the carefree alike to come and hide themselves away and there lead a life of a happiness that no one dreams could exist. It holds out the promise of a long, peaceful life where extreme old age lapses imperceptibly into a sleep like death. So I've said it's a bit macabre, isn't it? God's waiting room. That's the feeling I'm getting. It's fake idyllic. A place to go to die when you've had enough of living. Not like Tolstoy's farming scenes. So I'm reading Anna Karenina at the moment. And some of the farming scenes with Nikolai Levin on his farm in the springtime are also idyllic, but there's no sense of cloying, sweet, saccharine, over the top. It's all very nature and cyclical. We get cycles in this as well of the scenes and the seasons, but in Tolstoy it feels life-affirming. In this it feels the opposite of that. It feels like you've had enough of life, so you go here. It's kind of a bit like Eden, I suppose, in a sense, but yeah. It talks of clockwork seasons. It says there's no imposition of the harsh tyranny of cruel frosts. So that's the kind of contrast I'm talking about. There's no tyranny, is the word it uses, no harsh tyranny. Everything's just the same every day, and everything's cyclical, so you could set your watch by it, and there's just nothing's unexpected. Rain splashing cheerfully like generous hot teardrops of sudden joy. To which I've written, too much! Exclamation mark. And it is, it's too much. Lightning bolts to order, it's like an AI-generated Idyll. Or if you were to imagine heaven, this might be what you would think of. But then heaven's only heavenly when there's contrast. It's like right now we've got beautiful weather that seems like it's going to last forever, but I'm able to enjoy it because I know it's not going to last forever. I know that a few days' time it could be torrential rain and I won't be able to sit outside anymore, which makes me enjoy it all the more now. If I knew it was going to be like that every day, I probably wouldn't enjoy it nearly half as much. Then it says, God knows whether a poet or a philosopher would be content with the simplicity of nature in this quiet spot. To which I have responded, God and I both know the answer to that. No. And then the thought came to me, is it like Andalane? What's Andalane, you ask? Well, you might know that I love fantasy. I read a lot of fantasy books, and the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen Donaldson is my favourite series. I was going to say probably, but it's definitely my favourite series. And that's set in a land which isn't real. And in that land there's a part of it which is called Andalane, which ends up, it's untouched by the corruption that's going on around the rest of the land. It remains kind of idyllic and beautiful. So that came to mind as I was reading this. It goes on to say, neither a poet nor a philosopher would have remained content for long, even with the look of this modest and unassuming place. So, that's exactly what I meant when I said no. So this is the narrator talking, so he understands. He or she. No, it's a he. We know it's a he. Reasons which we'll get to in a time to come. Then I've come on to say the cabin sounds like something out of Howl's Moving Castle. The fairy tale of Baba Yaga is invoked. So it's talking about the cabin where they live, or the house, the wooden house, the dacha, whatever it might be called. It's kind of dilapidated and in a state of disrepair and feels like it could move around. Just made me think of Howl's Moving Castle. It says their attention was focused on themselves and did not intersect or overlap with the concerns of others. So we're getting into talk about the inhabitants of Oblomovka, this region. They don't care about the outside world. They're very insular and the outside world can disappear, doesn't exist for them. And then we jump to the present tense in the narration style as we get into Oblomov's upbringing, Ilya Ilyич's upbringing. Young Oblomov. It says that, the parenting style, his parents and guardians are very much like helicopter parents. He's not allowed to go anywhere near the ravine or the gully. The gully keeps getting mentioned time and time again as a dangerous place. There's demons in there. You mustn't go there. It says, with the strictest instructions to the nanny not to leave the child alone, not to let him near the horses, the dogs or the goat, or to wander too far from the house, and above all, not to let him near the gully that was the most terrifying spot in the whole neighbourhood and enjoyed a most unsavoury reputation. And I mean, kids are warned off of dangerous places. I was. Where I grew up, there was an old quarry in the golf course that I was warned off because it was dangerous and filled with water, and legend had it bottomless. The kind of stuff that kids come up with. And there was also a bing next to the old coal mine, which apparently was dangerous because you could sink into it and suffocate. But of course I did still go to these places. Did Oblomov go to the gully? We'll find out. His child's mind would absorb everything that was happening, and the deep impressions that were left took root and ripened with the passing years. So this gives us an inkling into why he is the way he is. I mean, nature and nurture, we've all got some of that. Your upbringing obviously has a bearing on how you are as an adult, so we get more of that here. In fact, that's kind of what this whole chapter's about. Nanny, can't you see the boy has run out into the sun? Get him back in the cooler. His head will get baked and he'll get sick and start feeling bad and lose his appetite. If you're not careful, he'll stray into the gully. Ah, yes, the gully, anything but that. Then we get a whole scene of an afternoon nap when the parents, the guardians, the servants, they all lie down in the heat of the afternoon because it's too hot to do anything, and they have a big long nap. Oblomov is a young boy at this time, so he uses this nap time as an opportunity to get up to mischief. And before you know it, the little scamp will be climbing up to the gallery, she thought to herself as she drifted off. This is Oblomov's nanny. Or maybe even down to the gully. So, he does use this time to run about, but he ends up not going to the gully at this time. He ends up running back to his nanny and waking her up. And then they wake up and they're all parched. They drink lots of tea, and then it says, and they all went about their business. I'm like, the business of doing hee-haw, because that's their business. The servants obviously have got stuff to do. They've got to prepare the meals, and it seems to be a big feature of everyday meal times. But the rest of them, they sit about. Dusk. One by one the rays disappeared, the last lingering for an eternity and piercing the dense canopy of branches like a fine needle until it too was gone. This is where I've said it almost feels too much. It's cloying. But then remember that we are in a dream. And then we are told that there's a goblin in the gully. Not to go near it because there's a goblin down there. This is the Stephen Pearl translation. I looked at the David Magarshack translation. He's called it a wood demon. And the Russian is Leshi, which I'd never come across before, so it's very interesting. Then the dream jumps to winter, and we get Nanny's tale of a land where no one does a stroke of work all year long, and where they know only that theirs is a world where handsome lads like Ilya Ilyich himself, and maidens whose beauty defies description, even in fairy tales, live lives of ease and pleasure. So Nanny's telling him stories of idyllic life, but she also tells them stories with adventure and danger, which kind of goes against the Idyll. Maybe it's to frighten them, but the Russians, they're really into their superstitions and their folklore. This really comes through in this chapter. It says, the nanny, or the tales themselves, so skillfully contrived to avoid reality that, to the end of his days, Oblomov remained in thrall to the legends and fantasies that had captured his imagination as a child. For him, real life and fairy tales were hopelessly intertwined. So remember we talked about how Oblomov is a passionate man. He's a creative person. He has ideas. He just never acts on them. So I can imagine him as a writer, as a storyteller. I think he would be good at that because he's got this love of fantasy and legend and folklore, which he's got from his childhood, because he never does go on to do that. Of course, it is possible that a life on unvarying sleepy tranquility, a life dull and uneventful and unmarked by real adversity, vicissitude, adventure or danger, makes people invent another fantasy world amid the real one around them in a search for excitement and stimulation for the idle imagination. Ilya Ilyich came to realise that it is not monsters that cause life's dangers, although he had hardly ever been exposed to any real danger, but he had expected something terrible to happen at any moment and was full of apprehension. So have these tales from his childhood got into his adult life in a negative way and made him afraid? Wonder. Dream shifts. Ilya Ilyich is now 13 or 14. He's attending school in Vierchlyovo, which is a school that's run by Stoltz's father. Young Stoltz is the same age as Oblomov, and we get into a bit of the schooling a bit later on. But this is what's going on here. It says, perhaps the child had already made up his mind that the one and only way to live was the way the adults around him lived. So, obviously, the way he's brought up, we've been through that. Did they ever ask themselves, that's the other people in his life, the adults, what's the purpose of life? God knows. The notion of a life of toil was something unknown to them. So these people don't seem real. They're living in Eden. They don't have to work. They follow rituals. They mark the calendar by name days and festivals, saint days, which are the same as name days, aren't they? Birthdays, deaths, marriages, births. These are the ritualistic date-marking events. And yeah, it seems like a life that's not real somehow. These people saw life as nothing but an ideal of peace, quiet and total inactivity, interrupted from time to time by certain unpleasant events such as illness, loss, disputes, and yes, even work. Imagine that. And it goes on to discuss the rituals. It says that the cycle of rituals gives life its zest and meaning. And that made me think of Gormenghast, which is another series of Gothic fantasy books by Mervyn Peake. Is another favourite series of mine, which is based around a castle called Gormenghast. And in this castle, the family and the royal family and those around them, they live a life of ritual. In fact, ritual for them is everything. Nothing else matters. So this made me think of that, which is interesting. It makes me wonder if Mervyn Peake read Gormenghast. Sorry, he wrote Gormenghast. It makes me wonder if Mervyn Peake read Oblomov. And then they get on to talk about the state of the estate, the house that's in disrepair. Mr. Oblomov, the old Oblomov, Ilya Ivanovich, he sees that jobs need to be done and then ends up kind of planning to do them, but then they never get done, or they get done in a haphazard, slapdash way. And this line really stood out to me as being funny. This is the narrator having fun with us. They were all amazed that the gallery should have collapsed when, only the day before, they had been equally amazed that it was still standing after all this time. So this is I suppose it's like a porch, I would think. Much like I've got out there where I like to sit. And it collapsed and killed a chicken and its chicks. So they're all amazed that it collapsed, but also amazed that it hadn't collapsed. You know what I mean? And then to repair it, they take away the debris. They hide it away so it's out of sight. and then there's another bit of the house needs repaired, so they get the debris back out and use it to repair the slapdash. It's ridiculous. And it talks of Ilya Ivanovich's participation in repairing a fence and a bridge, which is to say that he doesn't really participate in it at all. He just kind of plans to have it done and then gets it done in the most dangerous way possible. And says the Oblomovs would sooner have put up with the worst inconveniences or hardships, and indeed preferred not to think of them as inconveniences or hardships at all, than spend money. So it goes on to discuss how they're misers, basically. They won't spend money on anything, which kind of explains why the house is in such disrepair, because they won't pay for tradesmen to come in and do the work. Or they'll get them in to give a quote and then the guys go away, but they never call them back in to do the actual jobs that need doing. So it's fallen apart. And Ilya Ivanovich, I've mentioned this before, he runs the estate in a very standoffish way. You know, he's got income from his peasants, he's got income from the farm, I would imagine. But he never works out a way to make it more efficient and to boost the revenue. They never think about investing their capital in order to have it make more capital. They don't think of any of that stuff. They just hide money in mattresses, don't spend it, and the house falls into disrepair. And this is what Ilya Ilyich is growing up with. And, you know, it's understandable why he's struggling so much with his own estate now, while he's in Petersburg in his apartment, and he knows that the income is going down, and he's had the letter from the bailiff, and he just can't deal with it, you know. This is why he was brought up that way. And we're told that Ilya Ivanovich's father was the same, so this has been passed down. Then there's a little phrase here, the nights are fair drawing in, which I enjoy because it's a very Scottish phrase. The nights are fair drawing in. And so I looked up the Russian just for fun, which is Dlinie вечера наступают. So literally, the long nights are coming. So I like that. Well, that's life, says Ilya Ivanovich. Someone dies, someone is born, and meanwhile we're all getting older. It's bad enough that every year is different from the one before, but even the days are different from one another. Why is that? Now, if every day were like the one before and the one after, wouldn't that be something? It's really too bad when you think of it. He just wants every day to be the same. He doesn't want to have to work, he doesn't want to have to repair fences. He just wants the daily routine to be the same. And honestly, I can kind of relate to that a little bit. It's like when I get up, if I've got a day like tomorrow, woohoo! When I've got no appointments, I know the weather's going to be good, I know I'm going to get to spend it out there with my books, making content, writing notes. That's the best kind of day. When I've got appointments, or I've got to go shopping, or I've got chores, cut the grass, paint the fences, which I have been doing this year. You know, then it's kind of like, chores. Never mind work. You know what I mean? Imagine going out 8, 10, 12 hours a day, or what my wife does. She sits through there working all day, running her business. You know, when do you get time to have a day like Ilya Ivanovich covets? You know, holidays, I suppose. There was nothing to disturb the sameness of this life, and the Oblomov household did not feel it as at all tedious or cloying, since they were simply incapable of imagining anything different. And even if they could have, they would have recoiled from it in horror. And then as I was thinking about this scene, it came to me that this is like the Shire, isn't it? Hobbiton. This is like the hobbits in the Shire, going about their day without any adventures, without any wizards coming to upset the day, which is exactly what happens, and that's where the story comes from. So in Oblomov's dream, really there isn't a story at all. It's just background and information that gives us insight into what makes Oblomov the way that he is. And there's 50 pages of that. So unless you're invested in Oblomov as a character by this point, which is interesting because you wouldn't be when this was first published. You know, this was published, as I've said, before the novel, 10 years before the novel, and was successful. So imagine reading chapter 9 without any knowledge of the main character. What would you make of it? Is there a story there? Perhaps if you're Russian, you can maybe relate to it a lot better. But without knowing who Oblomov is and then being interested in why he is the way he is, I'm not sure chapter 9 would work on its own. So I'm curious why it was a success. And what, well, was it? I mean, it took him 10 years to write the rest of the book. Then he was travelling as well. He went off around the world on a frigate, the Pallas, Pallas, like the Greek. Is it Athena Pallas, I think? Anyway, there's a long section then that describes how Ilya Ilyich almost never went to school. There's always something. There's a name day. There's a holiday about to come up, so there's no point in going to school today because the holiday's soon. Or summer holidays are coming up, there's no point in going the week before. There's an instance where he goes to school, but then his servant comes to take him out of school because they've got visitors at the house. So he ends up just really doing the bare minimum, which we've discussed before. He must get his diploma because he ends up getting a job in the civil service, which we're told you need to have a diploma to get into or for a certain promotion, you need to have that diploma. And it does talk of how Stoltz was really against this non-attendance by his friend Ilya Ilyich. They're kind of opposites. Stoltz is very industrious and academic and achieves. Oblomov is very, don't fancy it today. You know, so interesting. They're looking for devious means and shortcuts. So I like that phrase. Kind of makes me think of the modern age and how, well, I suppose we're all looking for shortcuts in a sense. Doing the hard work is difficult. We all want the results without the hard work. It's like John Roderick, one of my favourite podcasters. He always used to say that his dream was to be a retired colonel. But in order to get to be a retired colonel, you have to go through the ranks and get there and do all the work. You can't just become a retired colonel. You know what I mean? So, yeah, devious means and shortcuts, which I liked. And then there's a scene, this is my favourite scene in this whole chapter, where Oblomov manages to escape from the cloying, the helicopter parenting, and he goes off in the snow, winter time, to have a snowball fight with the local boys. And he ends up getting hit in the face with a snowball, and we're told it was painful and he was down in the snow, but he got back up again and got back into it. And he was having a jolly old time, and then the servants come looking for him. They wrap him up in several different layers and take him home and put him to bed for 3 days. And it says in the very last sentence of the chapter, they kept him in bed for 3 days, but there was really only one thing that would have done him any good: to be out snowballing again. So we get the sense that, and then it's ... we get ellipsis, which seems to suggest that he never really got to go snowballing again or to do any kind of adventurous stuff. He was then kept home, kept away from school, went to school sometimes, got his diploma, and ended up becoming the Oblomov that we've read about in chapters 1 through 8. So there we go, Oblomov's dream. What did you make of it? Do you imagine yourself enjoying it if you'd read that first? Do you think you need to have context in order to care even about that chapter? What did you think of the idyllic setting? Did it seem heavenly and idyllic? Did it seem cloying? Did it seem too much? Could you imagine yourself living there happily? Let me know down below. I'd be keen to hear from you. So we'll see you again for chapter 10. Thanks for watching. Bye.